Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Calm is Hot. I'm very excited to bring you a special guest today. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Leo Weiss. I am an adult entertainer. And I guess the reason why I am of some notable fame, even though my career is fairly early, is that I am one of the very, very few Asian male hetero adult entertainers out there. So that kind of makes me very unique in this category, in this industry.
Yeah, that is definitely something we can dive into and talk about. Congratulations again about really building your brand, building your empire, if you will.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and your pronouns.
Oh, he, him. So yeah.
Great. Awesome. Thanks. For those of you who have stuck around for a while, mine are she, her. I'm Jade, I'm your host, and we're going to dive in getting to know Leo a little bit more. So, briefly tell us just something that may surprise us, something that your friends don't know. This is like a little lighthearted that I ask everybody.
I don't know. That's a tough one because I'm pretty open with my friends, and there's so many different groups of friends. So it's sort of like what one group of friends don't know, another group does, and another group like what they don't know, and another group might know. So what is something that they might not know? I don't know. I don't honestly. I think that might be the hardest question.
What about like a favorite hobby, or do you have like a quirk or like a pet peeve?
um, I don't. Let's see here. I've been skateboarding since I was 15, so we're at over 21 years now. So at one point in my life, I was trying to be a pro skater and all that. So I like to think I'm pretty decent at the kicky flippers and all that fun stuff. But I got kind of hurt the last couple of years, so I've been dealing with back injury and dealing with a lot of rehab on that. I don't know if that's like a fun fact or a quirk or not, but it is a very fundamental part of who I am and my identity was all those years growing up skateboarding. So
Awesome. I feel like maybe you have some tips out there for people who want to get into skateboarding. That's so cool.
I think you're never too old to get started. And as long as you're having fun with it, just keep going. And, the progression will get there.
That's awesome. Thanks so much for sharing that part of you. Now let's get into the fun stuff.
Okay. Okay.
So, you are a part of the adult entertainment industry, and I'm
Yes.
sure people are wondering how you got started.
Oh yeah. People always curious about how I got started, and it's hard to tell you it's hard to tell people the exact story of how I got started because the truth is it's like it's a lot like a Slumdog Millionaire, where it's like a series of random unrelated events all throughout your entire life that ultimately ended up with one moment where I had this like a weird eureka light bulb moment in my head that went, I am perfectly suited to be a one man porn creating like entity. You know what I mean? So the short version of this very long story is that I was living in San Francisco and I was man whoring it up on Tinder as one does when they're living in San Francisco. And I was I was hooking up with I was hooking up with women, and a couple different ladies in a row had mentioned some things about how my performance in bed was good, how the size was pleasurable, how like pretty much I could make a career in this if I wanted to. And one of these lovely ladies happened to have an ex-boyfriend who also at the time was one of the only was like the only Asian male hetero performer in porn at that time. He never really made it that big, but he was doing it. And so she got me in contact with him. We talked a little bit, and he kind of he kind of revealed the curtain a little bit just about the production side, how much production costs, how they do things, this and this and so forth. And that's kind of what led to that eureka moment of like, oh, I know how to edit, I know how to film, I know how to do photography, I know how to do this, I know how to do that. I have some money saved up, I have, all these things, I can do my own productions as well. If these guys can run their productions, I can do mine. And so, and then I've talked about this on the Asa Akira's podcast as well, but that's kind of what got the light bulb started. But the first actual time for me shooting porn wasn't even my own productions or anything. It was, once again, Tinder. I met these two lovely ladies on Tinder, and they were shooting content. They were shooting for some website. It wasn't like for a website, but there was a website that was like I forgot what it's called. It's like free lunch money, or I need lunch money, or something like that. But it's pretty much like a people order custom clips from models on that site, and the site kind of acts as like a escrow where they give the site the money, and then the model gives you the clip, and then once you receive the clip, you get the money from the site. And pretty much they had a Tinder profile saying that they were looking for a stunt cock because they shoot adult content. So, we matched. I hit them up to be like, hey, are you guys serious about this line? Like, and they were like, yeah, very serious. They wanted to get to know me before we started shooting. So we got dinner together first, the three of us. We got to meet each other. They thought I was cool. Like, we all got along. And then like the next weekend I went to their place and then shot my first porn. Got paid like a whole $30 out of it. So that's my first like professional porn right there.
That's amazing. I love that. That is such a cool background story. And I feel like that website's like the OG OnlyFans, like the
Right.
original. It's also so San Francisco, like people like lunch money, like you literally
Right.
need. Everybody's got a side hustle in this city.
Oh no, for sure, for sure.
And you only got $30. Like what?
Well, because I mean, ultimately at the end of the day, they're only paying like 120 for the custom clip. So it was kind of split between the three of us. So like I wasn't, they were cute. I was gonna have sex with them either way. But the fact that I got paid, I was like, hey, I went in not even expecting $30. I was just like, all right, cool. I'm gonna stunt cock with these girls because like they're nice and they're cute. And it just turns out like after I finished, they're like, here's your cut. And then they sent me on my way. And I walked out the door with $30 in my hand and I went, sweet, I'm gonna go get lunch.
That's awesome. The biggest, like my biggest like mantra about the sex industry is that like other people are fucking for free, but like some of us are walking away with money to do stuff.
Right.
So I don't know. It's like something to think about for our listeners. Now, you did mention several other things that I would love to kind of come back to in just a moment, but I think it's important to also acknowledge you have been putting yourself out there. You've been on other podcasts, you've been interviewed. And how does that feel? How does it feel to be able to kind of share your message, share your story?
It feels, if it's interesting. It's a little bit weird for me just because like I do suffer from imposter syndrome, you know what I mean? So I very much like, it's very weird to be like, anybody wants to interview me? Like, why would anybody want to interview me? Right. And especially, like my first interview was with Asa Akira for the Pornhub podcast. So it's not like it was a very small interview. So it's really shocking to be like, why would anybody care? That's my question. Right. Because I grew up very used to being kind of ignored. So the fact that I'm getting attention now is very kind of new to me. Not to say that's not expected. I mean, like coming into this, doing what I'm doing, this is pretty much the game plan. I guess what surprises me the most was how smoothly I was able to execute the game plan and to get to this point because, I still feel like an absolute imposter at times. I'm like, I don't know why anybody would ask me like to speak on behalf of industry and whatnot, but here I am doing it.
Now, I don't want to make this, and if anyone hasn't listened to that podcast episode, you absolutely should. I think that that is such an educational, informative podcast that is really, I love it. So I'm so glad that you were on that and that you gave that shout out. Students, go listen to it. I wanted to kind of ask you, like, do you think, because we are going to be talking about race, gender, etc.,
Right.
do you think that any parts of who you are played a specific role culturally in kind of going through that process, that internal process of shy, quiet, being ignored to like now managing this? Do you
Oh yeah,
think that
no,
any? Mhm.
I was gonna say 100%. Like I definitely wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the, you know, I definitely wouldn't be here if it wasn't for my upbringing, if it wasn't for the racism I felt and faced as a child, if it wasn't for just the subtle, like the subtle racism that kind of just permeate through our society, that like this lack of representation of people that look like me, this lack of these negative stereotypes that floated around. Like I definitely wouldn't be here if those things didn't exist, because as shy, quiet, and introverted as I may be in my personal life, growing up kind of oppressed does put a chip on your shoulder somewhat. Something gives you something to prove at times, you know. And as I can't deny it, like being choosing this path, part of it was because like I got something to prove to all the naysayers that said you can't do it.
Wow, I feel like there's so much to unpack there, and you're probably really, really offering something that's relatable to a lot of people. And that is something that I can relate to in my own separate way, not as race related, but gender related.
Right, right.
Like, so I just want to be clear about that.
And
But
no, totally. I mean, while oftentimes those of us who are in the non-majority group, right? We oftentimes have more similarities than differences based on the treatment by society. But the problem, I don't want to say it's a problem, but I do feel like it is an issue at times that we still focus on our differences more than our similarities, in the sense that, hey, we're being oppressed differently, but we're all being oppressed, which is the similarity. We should probably band against the oppression part instead of picking on who's being oppressed differently than other oppressed groups, you know?
yeah, I do know. I love that you called attention to that. I think one of the things that I try to encourage my students to think about is exactly what you just shared, right? Rather than looking at our backgrounds as our weaknesses or points of separation and division, we can recognize how these things can actually empower us and help us come together. And ultimately, a lot of us are fighting the similar enemy, a similar enemy, white supremacy, all of the things. So it's really exciting to hear you um, take that perspective.
Yeah, thank
You
you.
must be from the Bay Area.
No, yes, yes, very much. Born in Taiwan, but raised in the Bay. So definitely have a very, very leftist way of thinking.
I mean, same. So I'm here for it. And grateful for you speaking on it. Okay, now my next question for you is kind of something you already called attention to, but I'm hoping we can dive a little more into, which is the lack of Asian masculine representation in this industry. Like you said, when you first were entering it, there was only like one person doing like who's masculine, who's doing hetero scenes. And so do you want to speak a little bit more on that?
Um, sure, but I mean, well, before I speak further, you want to give me a little more direction on what direction you wanted to go with this, or because it's a very
Yeah,
broad topic,
how
you know?
yes, how you've seen the industry change. Is it changing and evolving? Is there more representation?
Hmm.
Are you feeling like more empowered now at this point in your career?
Okay, okay. I see where you're trying to get with this. I don't. So this is a little tricky one, because when we talk about the industry, right? Like people from the outside like to think about this as like, as like there's a porn incorporated company that we go into with like a porn CEO by like, the company ran by Johnny Porn, and like there's a porn HR. And if you want a job in porn, we just walk over to HR and it's like, hey, I got this friend. Is there any positions they can fill? And like people think that kind of like that when we talk about the industry. But the reality of the industry is like it's literally hundreds, if not thousands, of independent contractors. Everybody's their own business, right? So the reason I'm bringing this up is that when it comes to lack of Asian male representation in heterosexual porn, because to note to everybody out there, there's a lot of Asian men in gay porn. There's just none in like hetero straight porn. And the whole reason I'm bringing all of this up is that I've never felt pushback from the industry, from the people in the industry, from the other performers, from the agencies. I've never felt pushback from anybody for being Asian. So the only reason I can understand, like the only reason I can see for there being a lack of Asian male representation is that we just didn't show up, you know? David Lee is another Asian male performer right now who is doing big things and getting a lot of mainstream shoots. He showed up, right? And I'm starting to get booked for a lot of mainstream shoots as well because I showed up. And the only difference between me, David, and all these other Asian guys who aren't in the industry is we showed up and they didn't. That's the only really difference I see, right? We made the commitment to do porn and everyone else just didn't, you know?
And I'm sure there are so many different layers there and reasons. I
Right.
think, like, so ethnically, I'm Middle Eastern, and I
Okay.
think that it's like very controversial to be a part of this industry and to, I guess, like have a collectivistic kind of background where like your choices, like your whole family's in it, like what you do and your actions impact your family. And making a decision to go into an industry that's controversial when you're a part of a culture like this, it's not easy. And so I'm also wondering, like, for me, that's probably why there's such a lack of like Middle Eastern
Right,
people.
right.
You feel similarly?
Oh yeah, no, 100%. And I do understand that is one of the big barriers. I mean, and it's not even just an Asian thing, right? Because it's across the board. Most people in general have a really difficult time even just talking about sex and sexuality with their parents, let alone telling them that I'm going to make a career having, you know, sex in the open for people to view to their parents. So that is like, regardless of your ethnicity or your gender or whatever, that probably is the biggest barrier to entry for just about everyone, is to just be like, hey, my parents are going to find out. There's like, you know, it's almost impossible to hide it because you're going to have somebody who's going to want to harass you online. Like even somebody you've never met before, you'll end up with a stalker or somebody who just wants to troll you or something like that, who will find your stuff and try to like dox you or something like that. So it's, once you step that, it's pretty much like there's no dipping your toes in this industry. Either you dive in or you don't, right? And that's really difficult for a lot of people because, you know, people, you fantasize about the idea about like, oh, maybe if I could dip my toes, maybe if I just do one scene here and there, I just kind of experience it and so forth. And it's like, no, you either dive in or you don't, because that one scene will surface somehow. Somebody will find it. It will be out there. And somebody may try to dox you to your family and whatnot, you know. So 100% understand like that is the biggest barrier to entry.
Yeah, thank you for speaking to that. I also want to follow up and ask, and you do not have to answer anything, but I am curious to know, did you have that conversation with your parents?
Oh yes, no, of course I had to have that conversation with my parents, and like especially, you know, being an Asian male performer, when at the time when I was coming in and the time when I was preparing to do this, David Lee hadn't started his career yet either. So there was literally zero Asian male performers when I was deciding to do this. And I knew right off the bat, right off the top of my head, like right at the very beginning, that like, because there is zero Asian male performers, if I perform, there's not like a sea of Asian dicks I could just hide behind and be like, that wasn't me, guys. I swear that was some other Asian guy that looks, you know, like it'd be like, yeah, no, that's me. It's just, I'm the only one, right? So I understood that. And then I have like cousins and stuff that are all, you know, like who are males, and, you know, like I know people watch porn. So what I didn't want, being the only Asian guy, like planning to be the only Asian guy at the time coming in, it was understanding that like, if my parents didn't find out, one of my relatives may find out, rumors may start spreading around the family reunions. And if that's the case, I'd much rather my parents hear it from me than to hear it from a rumor floating around somewhere during like a family party. You know what I mean? So I preemptively just told them before I officially did it that look, I had this opportunity, I have this chance, I've been thinking about it, I've committed to doing it. I don't know, at the time it was like, I don't know when I'm going to do it, but I'm just letting you guys know, if you start hearing rumors around the family or stories and so forth, they're probably true,
Similarly, had a similar conversation with my parents and was like, how do you think I survived school in San Francisco? So that is exciting to hear that you had that conversation, because I'm all about communication. I think openness can be really empowering, that vulnerability. And like
Right.
you said, you took control of that narrative rather than your family finding out through rumors or from other people. You were like, you're going to get it from me.
Exactly. And then it also takes the power away from like, trolls and whatnot, because honestly, if anybody's like, like, what do your parents think about this? I'm like, I don't know. I already told them. Like, I don't, you can't hurt me with that. You can't threaten me with that. Right. Because I got in front of it. I told them, they know, we don't talk about work, but they still call me and they're like, we love you. We're proud of you, this and this and so forth. So it's like, yeah, it really just, it's just one less thing to worry about while you're navigating this industry, is knowing that your parents got your back. And, and not to, there are lots of people whose parents don't support their decisions and choices, and that is an absolute tragic shame. But for those of us who have the support from our parents and our family, it is a huge burden, like is a huge relief of burden, like this huge weight lifted to be like, cool, I can now navigate freely without having that weighing me down.
I love that. Yes, yes. Like, I think what you're speaking to doesn't only have to be limited to this industry, but just support from family and friends in general can be life changing.
All right.
And having a support system is so crucial for everybody. So thank you for calling attention to that. Okay, so next, there's so much I want to keep going with that, but we have some other stuff to get through.
Okay, no problem.
I'm interested in hearing like kind of a funny moment that you had on set, maybe when you were newer, because this is an industry that I think a lot of people, it just remains a fantasy. They don't realize that there's so much production that goes on behind. There's just so much, right? It's not just what they see. So
Right. So for the first year or so of my journey here into the world of adult entertainment, I was self-producing, and with that, like, so that means my shoots were very, very minimal, right? It was pretty much me, the talent, and some tripods. And so in that sense, like, I don't really have too many good behind the scenes stories there, because you don't get into too many hijinks when it's just, you, the other talent, and some tripods, right? Probably one of the funnier stories was at one of the earlier starts of my career. I shot with Febby Twigs for one of my productions, and then she reached out to me and she wanted to shoot just content trade, and she wanted to bring another performer, her friend Layla Lewis, and pretty much have they were going to shoot girl content together, and then they want to bring me in for like a threesome content. And I'm like, all right, cool, no problem. But the only day that it worked out for all of us was also my weekly Dungeons and Dragons day with my friends on Zoom. This is during the quarantine and all that. And so it's like, I can't change Dungeons and Dragons day, because, there's multiple people committed to Dungeons and Dragons here. Like, it's a weekly thing. We're pretty like far along with it, but it's also the only day. So we had scheduled it in a way that like, okay, you girls can do the girl scene like in the morning, then I'll take this Dungeons and Dragons break, then while you guys go shoot some photos, and then we'll do this thing afterwards. And so, but scheduling wise, it ends up being that everybody was running late, as usually happens on a porn shoot day. And and pretty much they were shooting the girl while I'm playing Dungeons and Dragons at my desk. So I live in like a studio apartment. There's no walls, there's no separation. So it's just kind of interesting that I'm on one side of the studio playing Dungeons and Dragons with my friends, while they're on the other side, on the opposite side of my computer, having a girl scene going on. I don't know if my friends can overhear them doing it in the background, but I can like hear them the entire time. And then even in the middle of that, they finished the girl scene, and I'm still in the middle of playing Dungeons and Dragons when when Febby and Layla decide to sneak underneath my desk and have a little fun with me. And my friends didn't know that was what was happening at the time, so I'm trying my best to keep a straight face, but at a certain point, like I think I make a weird face, or something like that, and our DM is kind of like, oh, am I boring you? Are you falling asleep? And I'm like, no, 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 something else completely altogether is going on right now. Don't mind me, guys.
That story is probably the most iconic story I have ever heard in my life. You are also giving so much hope to like all of the nerds out there that think like, oh, I'm just a nerd. Like I'm never going to get like hot girls. And
Oh,
the
I mean,
hope is there.
no, yeah, I mean, like at the core, I'm a huge nerd. Like I grew up, video games and comic books and all these like literally as nerdy gets. But you have to remember, like nerdy is a mindset. It's not a physical trait. It's just a mindset. And you can be a nerd and hit the gym. You can be a nerd and eat healthy and get exercise. You could be a nerd and wear nice clothes and like look good and still be a nerd, like the being nerd and being like cool, popular, or whatever are not mutually exclusive things.
No, and I know that as an academic, like I get lost in research and highly identify as a nerd in many ways,
Right.
and ended up in a Dungeons and Dragons tournament when I was in Seattle by accident. And so I use that term also being like, also identifying as.
Right.
Love that. That is a hilarious story. Which, by the way, this is totally off script, but back when I was in Seattle, yeah, there were like so many different events. There was like Comic-Con, there were tournaments for Dungeons and Dragons, etc. So you've got to get out there and travel a little, maybe do some of these bigger like Dungeons and Dragons events.
Oh, I would love to. It's just the pandemic is I'm still keeping traveling to a minimal degree. I'm going to events here and there, but not nearly as much as I would like to, or as much as I used to before the pre-COVID days.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Same. Okay. So, all right. Are there any misconceptions about the industry? Back on script. Are there any misconceptions about the industry that you're like, this is a huge misconception. I just want to throw this out there, let people know, like educate people about this.
There's so much. I mean, pretty much everything people think about the industry, everything that people from the outside think about the industry is almost always some sort of misconception, right? Whether it's just completely outdated information. Somebody will say something, be like, I heard, Ron Jeremy say once, blah, blah, blah. And you'd be like, you mean information from like 35 years ago? Like things change, right? Like, or there's the whole, the anti-porn people right now are doing a really good job of conflating consensual porn with human trafficking. And again, like that's a huge misconception because we're at least in the professional circuit, we're all here willing, consensual, like working on stuff. Now, not to say that bad things don't happen in this industry, because like I said, at the core, we are hundreds, if not thousands, of independent contractors. Some of us may be, bad people doing bad things, right? That shouldn't reflect on the entire industry as a whole, but it's the reality is like when one person does something really fucked up, right? Like when girls do porn gets caught doing what they did, and I don't know if I need to go into a full breakdown for your audience, but the short version of what girls do porn did was they pretty much lied to all the performers about where the content was going to be distributed, told them it was never going to be online and so forth. That's how they were able to get models who don't normally do porn to do porn, pretty much. And then there was a lot of like coercion, there was straight rape, there was a lot of things. Girls do porn literally committed all the fucking sins that you could possibly commit in the industry. They did everything wrong. And the reality of girls do porn though is that it was a small independent operation running out of San Diego, so it wasn't even in the hub of the porn industry. It was ran by like 3 or 4 people, and three of them are in jail, and the owner of the company is on the run from the feds right now, like internationally or something like that. So it's not like you can't do those things and get away with it. You know what I mean? Like those are horrible things. And when you do horrible things, you eventually get caught, you eventually get in trouble. So when you see all these other established companies operating openly for so many years, it's kind of hard to imagine that like they were also doing horrible human trafficking type situations. It's like, no, they're legitimate companies operating with, consenting adults, doing their due diligence, making sure the paperwork is correct. Like there is a lot of legal paperwork when you go onto a set. Like professional companies run in that professional manner. Now, but it's a shame that like Girls Do Porn got caught doing what they did and nobody in the industry defended them, but then they get propped up as like that is the industry, that's the standard operating, the standard operating procedure for the industry, that's how everybody operates. And you're like, no, that's one person, like one small company, not even in the heart of the industry, that is now making everybody look like we're all human traffickers and like horrible things, right? So
Yeah, and that kind of leads me to think about some of the things that I discuss with my students, like censorship. We've got like morality culture, purity culture. We've got religion from all different parts of the world. So many different religions teaching us, like purity is the best, more like all these things. And it's just so exhausting to have such a small company, like you said, or like this company just do all of the things they're not supposed to do and then be propped up as like, look, this is what the industry is like. And it's like, no.
exactly. It's kind of like saying, we point out Harvey Weinstein and the horrible things that he did in Hollywood to be like, well, therefore, Steven Spielberg is a horrible person. And same as like, all these other directors and studios and all this stuff. And it's like, no, that person is responsible for him. And, there's plenty of people who are just making films, making movies, minding their own business, right?
Yeah, I know many of my friends, and it's exhausting. Yeah, but I am so glad that you spoke to that. And I think that will be something that I might have my students do more research into. Thank you.
Yeah, it's the Girls Do Porn is an actually very interesting case. And it kind of just, I think if people actually did the study on that case, it kind of debunks the entire myth of the whole human trafficking, this and this and so forth, because it shows you that like it's not a sustainable business model, because you do get caught, you do get outed, you do go to jail. So there's, how is the rest of us operating so out in the open? We're probably not doing that,
Yeah, yeah. This leads me to my next question for you, which is about boundaries. I ask everyone this question. Again, this is like a very big, broad question, so I can help give you direction if you want, but is there a specific time, or do you have like specific protocol you follow? How important, the first part of my question, how important is setting boundaries and communicating them when you're in this industry? And what does it look like?
Boundaries are always very important in this industry because for multiple reasons. Number one, for your own for your own mental health, your own physical health, and also for your brand. At the end of the day, like this goes right back into what I said before. We are independent contractors. We are responsible for ourselves. We are our own small business, and each one of us is our own brand, right? And even if you're like, there's certain things that, even in my personal life, I'm like, yeah, I'm okay with doing this, but I wouldn't do it on camera or whatnot, because it's not the brand that I'm building. It's not the character that I'm portraying and whatnot. So in that sense, like having boundaries is very important for a myriad of reasons. And all of it is to kind of just protect yourself, whether it's your physical health, your mental health, or just your professional brand, right? Like if you're known as a professional dom, you wouldn't want to sign up and take sub, roles, because it hurts your brand, right? That's not who you are as a performer. That's not who your character is. That's not, so there's a lot of reasons why boundaries are very important, but they're definitely very important in this industry. And setting boundaries can look like all sorts of different things, but everybody has their own. That's kind of the beauty of this, is that because we're all our own independent businesses here, we all set our own boundaries, and everyone's boundaries looks different. So just make sure that you communicate with your partners and the people that you're working with. And if something, even if you even have a question, just ask them and be like, hey, is this okay if we do this and that? I mean, everyone's boundaries is different. Some women I talk to, it's like, the boundary is don't stick a finger in me because they don't like the way the finger feels. And it's like, for a lot of people, they're perfectly okay with it. But you voice those things, you talk about it, your do's and don'ts and whatnot, and you just do your best to make sure everyone's having a good time.
Yes, I think this, okay, I'm so passionate about this. Obviously, well, not obviously, but I teach communication. And so it is so crucial that people realize it's okay to communicate your likes, your dislikes.
Right.
It's so important. There are people who like go so long doing things that they don't actually like. And it's like, no, you can say no, you can say you don't like that.
Right. And also, like, you can check in even in the middle of sex and so forth, and it doesn't have to ruin the mood and the scene and whatnot, right? Like there are sexy ways that you can just kind of lean in, whisper in the ear, and be like, does that feel good? Do you like that? Do you want me to keep going? And just kind of reaffirm that like everything is good, right? And if they say no or like slow down or whatnot, then to slow down or to stop or switch to something different. And again, it doesn't necessarily, a lot of people when they talk about consent, they think it's just like this really boring kind of like, so we sit down with the clipboard and a checklist and we just really like non-sexy, non-fun. But you can make consent sexy, you can make consent fun. It's like, it's just, there are ways that you can literally check in with a person in the middle of the action and make sure that everyone's still having a good time and on the same page.
Oh my gosh, I am so eternally grateful for you speaking to this because consent it is sexy and it can be sexy and you can do it in sexy fun ways. Like sometimes, most of the time, like I may be doing something with someone and I might be like, is it okay if I do this? And I'll just ask in the moment, but make it like playful and fun.
Right. And tip for the tip for the guys out there and maybe the ladies out there, who everybody, but just generally, your partner, when they feel comfortable, they usually have more fun. And when people are having more fun, everyone's having more fun. So just make sure that people are comfortable. Make sure that it's not make sure your partner is having a good time. Like,
Oh my God, thank you for saying that. And yeah, call out the men. No, just kidding. Jokes, just jokes.
I mean, that's a general life tip for everybody, really. So
It is. But I'll take an opportunity as a leftist in the Bay to,
no,
make
I
these
understand. I
jokes.
mean, there is a generality. Generally, it is a certain demographic of people who are not thinking as much about the pleasure of others. Um, so we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. We'll leave it at that. And then I'll go deeper with my students in class. Thank you so much. Okay, so moving forward, love the boundary consent talk. Well, that actually kind of answers the next one. So moving forward, are you working on any projects currently that you'd like to share that people can look into, support, etc.?
um, right now I'm shooting a lot of content trade stuff, so they're not really like big projects, nothing to like announce and whatnot. I mean, I'm shooting with some pretty big talent, so like that's exciting, but the scenes themselves are pretty straightforward, of just like, let's just get attractive people having attractive sex on camera, right? With that being said, though, as I'm navigating this industry and as I'm meeting other people in the industry, and not necessarily the performers, but like I'm meeting camera people, directors, like all the other stuff that you need to make a higher quality production. I'm able to, like, I now have the what's the word I'm looking for, the crew. I can now put together a crew to do the higher level productions that I've always wanted to do, something maybe with a storyline, scripts and stuff like that. One of the filmers that I've become really friendly with used to also skateboard and also was from San Francisco as well. So we've been talking about maybe doing like a series of like skateboard related, porn videos where it's like Skater Boys or something like that, right? So that might be a fun project
I
coming up down
want
the
in
road.
on that.
So that might be a fun project coming in on that. And then brief advertisement, because I know Olivia J has been super excited about this, but she's trying to organize a shoot with her, Nicole Kitt, me, and David Lee. And I think that probably might be the very first and only time on camera where it's a two Black women and two Asian men having like a group sex situation, because I don't think that's ever been recorded on camera before. So
Oh my gosh, it's time to change that.
yeah.
That's awesome. And all jokes aside, I really do think that it's exciting for you to be able to bring in your hobbies and your passions into the storytelling and kind of really, I look at porn as art and as like creativity. It has the potential for so much creativity. And so for you to kind of bring in your passions and hobbies into that, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And I also think the representation is so necessary.
Oh yes, of course. And I mean, I always I view porn as art as well. And it's not even like an opinion. Like it's fact. Porn is just a genre of filmmaking, right? Like porn, being a porn maker is not different than being like a documentary maker or whatnot. Like you just chose a specific genre to focus your filmmaking on. But at the core, you're still making film. You're still a filmmaker, right? Like, and again, there's even in the realm of filmmaking, there's really, really good filmmakers and there's some really, really bad filmmakers, but they're still making films. And in porn, it's the same thing. Like, you know, a documentary could be this high level production value that you see on TV, and also be a person with a cell phone on the streets recording just very shaky cam stuff. That's still a documentary, right? And porn is the same way. You have these high end, you know, vixen level, like glamorous, fly you over to France to get the Eiffel Tower in the background kind of porn. And then at the same time, you have cell phone in a dark room, shaky cam. Like it's still filmmaking though. Like, so,
Yeah, it is. Oh,
oh, I was gonna say, and you know, depending, and the quality of the camera and so forth doesn't dictate the art of filmmaking, because there are some really incredible like films out there shot on like iPhones, right? I remember this one movie I saw was called Snow in the Bluff, and it was literally shot like shaky cam iPhone style, because the entire premise was the movie was these like suburban kids go to the hood to buy drugs, get robbed by the drug dealer picks up their camera and then films his own documentary from a like POV point of view. So it's literally him walking around shaky cam the entire time, but it ends up compelling a really compelling story about life in the struggle for those people, you know? So, you know, porn is very much the same way. There's actually excellent filmmaking told in porn through shaky camera sometimes.
yeah, it's everything. I feel like life is a performance. Everything we do is some level of performance, and the art that's captured in that through camera, through film, is something that we're kind of grateful to be able to witness and be a part of sometimes, whether or not you're in front of the camera or viewing. Thanks for
Right.
speaking to that. Yeah. This kind of brings us to a close. And so I want to ask you, do you have any, you've spoken to so many different aspects of this industry, to your experiences, personally, professionally, and I'm deeply grateful for your vulnerability and your willingness to be so open.
Yeah, no, of course.
Do you have any additional thoughts? Do you want to go back and clarify anything? Is there anything that you would like to speak to that we didn't get to?
I mean, there's a lot, like there's so much in this industry, this topic, just, you know, in general, about sex, sexuality, about discovering who you are. Like there's so much stuff to talk about, and we can, you know, honestly go on for forever. uh,
Yes, that I should have asked you. You recently did a scene with a trans performer
right.
who I love and who
Mimi's
I've
awesome.
also
Yes.
interviewed.
Yes.
Um, and so do you want to speak to that a little bit? What it's like being hetero performer shooting with a trans girl for a scene?
Right. Well, I mean, this goes whole down into the whole concept that like people are more than just the genitalia that they have, right? There's still the other 99% of the person. and trans women are women, because you have to take into account the entirety of the human being, not just the genitalia. So the way I always look at it is that, you know, for me, sexuality or my sexual desire is not based on like my attraction to genitalia. It's an attraction to the person and the markers of the person, right? As in, like, I'm attracted to femininity, right? um so in this example, like, how do I put this? How do I put it? In the discussion about trans people, we tend to disregard and completely ignore the concept that female to male transgender people also exist, which would be a person who is now on testosterone, who is now, you know, like going by the name Chris, with like short hair, a full beard, deep voice, pecs, like hairy chest, super buff, and a tight pussy, right? Like, is it straight for me to be with Chris? You know what I mean? Like that, like, so you have to take into account the entire person. And if that's the case, you know, it throws you in this weird dichotomy where it's like, what is heterosexual, right? Is it more straight to be with like Ariana Grande with a dick, or Terry Crews with a vagina? If those are your two choices, which one would make you straight?
I don't think straight exists.
I think it's a spectrum, of course, right? But like, there's the different degrees there's different degrees along that spectrum. But the whole point is that, like, people are much more than just the genitalia that they have. There's so many other indicating factors that signal to you sexual arousal, sexual attraction, and so forth. And in regards to, you know, shooting with me or just trans women in general, I look at the person as a whole. And, you know, you sound like a woman, you carry yourself like a woman, you smell like a woman, like you're a woman, like you act like a woman, like, and and on the flip side, if you sound like a man, you look like a man, you act like a man, I don't care if you have the tightest, cutest vagina in the world, like you're a man at that point. You know what I'm saying? So I know.
I
Go on.
think there's something to be said that I'm going to add from my perspective as a trans person, that really I want to say for listeners that my humble perspective, and I hear everything you're saying and I get it, like, especially if people are performing gender in all of these hyper feminine or hyper masculine ways so that they can be perceived as such. That makes total sense. And I think that's the context you're speaking to.
Right.
And I also want to clarify that there's, of course, as you know, this whole galaxy of gender where people don't have to have surgery or be on hormones or perform hyper femininity or hyper masculinity, but that they can also exist as they are and still be trans or non-binary. And so I just want to call attention to that, give that a shout out. Because this context is specifically, we're talking about performers who are hyper masculine, they are performing hyper femininity in order to affirm their gender. So I just want to be clear about that.
Oh yeah, yes, no, 100%. And again, like, as you mentioned, you know, in the grand scheme of things, there's so many different different gender sexualities and things like that. So it's an entire topic on its own. But just speaking on behalf of myself in the way that I, you know, view this and so forth, because, you know, I've had trolls and stuff like that, you know, be like, how can you say that you're straight when you know, shot with this trans person? And again, it just goes right back into like, would you not question it if it was a female to male trans person that I shot the scene with? Because, you know, vagina, so straight, right? But like, that would be way, you know, I don't know. I feel like less straight. I don't know.
It totally makes sense to me. And the argument that you're making comes down to the reality that everybody reduces trans people to their genitals, and you are in fact trying to do the opposite.
Exactly. The genitals don't matter. It's the rest of the person, you know? There's still a whole 99% of a person to look at, and well, that's what I'm judging you on.
And that's a reality. Everybody gets judged. Oh, I should have you on for another episode about the reality of like, oh my gosh, there's so much we could talk about. The judgment, the beauty standards, oh my gosh, there's so much we could get into. But I do want to keep this a reasonably timed episode for my students so they don't hate me.
I totally understand.
Do you want to share any contact info like socials so they can follow you, find you, whatever?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. My social, I pretty much just tell people just search me on Pornhub because then you can find my profile and then you can find all my socials on there. The socials are all pretty much the same, but Instagram, Twitter, I have to kind of one has underscores, one doesn't, and stuff like that. So it's just easier to just tell people search for me on Pornhub. Just go to Pornhub, Leo Weiss. My profile should pop up, and then from there you'll be able to see all my socials, all my things, and then also you can make sure that it is the correct account because I do get imposters that pop up here and there. So just don't fall for that. And I would say, yeah, that's probably the easiest way to find me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being a guest on this show. And I look forward to learning more from you and hearing more from you and seeing you succeed in this industry.
No, no, awesome. Thank you so much for having me as a guest. This was awesome. It was a lot of fun, and it was really great speaking with you.
Awesome. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording and then we can just do a quick check in.
Okay, yeah, yeah, no problem.